Vincent, I see a lot of young trees supported by wooden stakes. Some of them are tied so tightly that the trunk can barely move. Is that actually good for the tree?
Not always. In fact, many newly planted trees do not need to be staked at all. A tree should only be staked when it needs temporary support. For example, the root ball may be unstable, the planting site may be very windy, or the tree may not be able to remain upright on its own. But staking should not be automatic just because the tree is young.
So we should not assume that every newly planted tree needs stakes.
That's right. If a tree has been planted correctly, the root ball is stable, and the trunk can remain upright, it may be better to leave the tree unstaked. Trees are designed to move. A small amount of movement in the wind helps the trunk develop strength and encourages the roots to grow into the surrounding soil.
I think a lot of people see movement and assume the tree is too weak.
Exactly. Some movement is normal and healthy. The important question is whether the trunk is moving slightly or whether the entire root ball is rocking back and forth in the planting hole. If the root ball is moving, that can damage newly developing roots and slow establishment. In that situation, temporary staking may be appropriate.
So the stakes are really there to keep the roots stable, not to hold the entire trunk completely still.
That's a good way to think about it. The goal is to stabilize the root ball while still allowing the trunk to move a little. The tree should not be strapped down so tightly that it cannot respond naturally to wind.
What happens when the tree is tied too tightly?
Tight ties can rub against the bark and damage the trunk. As the tree grows, the ties may begin cutting into the bark and wood. This can restrict the movement of water and nutrients through the tree. That type of damage is known as girdling.
Can that really happen from something as simple as a tree tie?
Yes, it happens more often than people realize. A tie may look loose when the tree is first planted, but the trunk continues to grow wider. If no one checks it, the tie can slowly become embedded in the tree. Sometimes the tree begins growing around the tie, and by the time someone notices, the damage may already be serious.
So even if the staking was done correctly in the beginning, it still needs to be monitored.
Absolutely. Staking is not something you install and forget about. The tree should be inspected regularly. Check whether the ties are rubbing against the bark, whether they have become too tight, and whether the tree is already stable enough to stand on its own.
What kind of material should be used for the ties?
The ties should be wide, soft, and flexible. Materials that spread pressure over a wider area are usually better than thin wire, rope, or narrow plastic ties. Thin materials can cut into the bark, especially when the tree moves in the wind.
I have seen trees tied directly to stakes with wire.
That can cause significant damage. Wire should never be placed directly against the trunk. Even wire covered with a piece of hose can cause rubbing or pressure if it is installed too tightly or left in place too long. The connection should support the tree gently, not clamp it in place.
Where should the ties be placed on the trunk?
They should usually be placed low enough to allow the upper portion of the trunk to move naturally. A common mistake is attaching the tree very high on the trunk. That can hold the entire tree rigid and prevent normal movement. You want the lowest point that still provides enough support to keep the root ball stable.
And where should the stakes triples be placed?
The stakes should generally be placed outside the root ball whenever possible. This helps avoid damaging the roots and provides a wider, more stable support system. 2 stakes are often enough, although the exact setup depends on the tree, the soil, and the amount of wind at the site.
What about the narrow wooden stake that comes attached directly to the trunk from the nursery?
That is an important one. That narrow stake is usually there to protect the tree during transportation and handling at the nursery. It is not normally intended to remain attached after planting. It should usually be removed once the tree is planted.
I see those left on trees all the time.
So do I. When that nursery stake stays tightly attached to the trunk, it can rub against the bark, restrict movement, and interfere with proper trunk development. It can also hide defects or make it difficult to see whether the tree can actually support itself.
Is there a simple way for a homeowner to check whether the tree still needs staking?
Yes. Gently move the trunk and observe the base of the tree. If the trunk moves slightly but the root ball remains firm in the soil, the tree may no longer need support. If the entire root ball shifts or lifts out of the soil, the tree may need temporary support for a little longer.
I assume they should not pull hard on the tree.
Correct. This should only be a gentle check. You are not trying to test the tree's limits. You are simply observing whether the roots and soil are stable.
How long should support stakes normally remain in place?
They should remain only as long as necessary. For many trees, that may be several months or through the first growing season. The exact timing depends on the tree, the planting conditions, and how quickly the roots establish. The important point is that stakes should not remain in place for years.
What can happen if they are left too long, even if the ties are not cutting into the bark?
The tree may become dependent on the support. If the trunk is held rigid for too long, it may not develop the strength and taper it needs to stand up to wind on its own. Then, when the stakes are finally removed, the tree may lean or even fail because it did not have the opportunity to strengthen naturally.
So, over-supporting a tree can actually make it weaker.
Exactly. The best support is the minimum amount needed for the shortest amount of time.
What are some warning signs that a tree has been staked improperly?
Look for ties cutting into the bark, worn or scraped areas on the trunk, a trunk that cannot move at all, stakes rubbing against branches, or a tree that has been tied in several places from top to bottom. You may also notice the tree leaning heavily against the ties instead of standing upright on its own.
What should someone do if they find ties already embedded in the trunk?
They should avoid pulling or tearing them out forcefully. If the tie is only beginning to tighten, it may be possible to remove it carefully. But if it is deeply embedded or the trunk is damaged, it is a good idea to contact an ISA certified arborist or consulting arborist for guidance. Removing embedded material incorrectly can cause additional injury.
So proper staking really comes down to a few basic ideas. Only stake when the tree actually needs support. Keep the root ball stable. Allow the trunk to move slightly. Use soft, flexible ties. Check the tree often, and remove the stakes as soon as the tree can stand on its own.
That's exactly right. Staking should be temporary support, not permanent restraint. A young tree may need a little help while its roots become established, but it also needs the freedom to move, adapt, and grow strong.
Great advice. Thanks, Vincent.
You're welcome, Victoria.
And thank you for listening to Ask the Arborist from Voice for Trees, helping people understand, protect, and care for trees.